Hey guys, welcome back to Car Culture TV, or as we like to call it, CCTV. I'm Aryan,
And I'm Audit.
and in today's lovely podcast, we have a wonderful arrangement of segments for you guys. We'll start off with the weekly news in the automotive world with Speed Trap. Then we'll move on to a new segment we like to call Car Roast, and we'll discuss one of the most, let's say, interesting cars of our time. And then we'll finally finish with That'll Buff Right Out, where we'll discuss one of the most atrocious car mods I think we've seen in recent years. So now, let's get into Speed Trap. In this week's episode of Speed Trap, the first thing we're going to discuss is the brand new Volvo Polestar 2. What are your thoughts on that?
So when I first heard that Volvo was going to be making an electric car, I was shook. I
Yeah,
just didn't
for sure.
expect, this relatively small in terms of size company to be putting out an electric car as fast as they have.
Yeah, and when you think of like the market of vehicles, Volvo is like one of the last things you think of. It comes like in the back of your head.
Right, and a lot of people, they think it's German. They don't even realize that it's a Swedish car maker. People only think of IKEA when they think of Volvo.
Yeah.
And the other thing is Polestar 2.
Yeah, that was the one interesting thing. So I know many of you guys might know as well that Volvo is like, the Polestar is like a trim that Volvos have, like the S60 Polestar. And it was weird to see that their electric car brand was going to be almost like a separate company with the Polestar name.
Yeah, so there's a lot of design elements that go into the car. You can see that Polaris star that was very specific to Polestar's trim now being the front badge on the car. If you look at the car itself, there's actually no Volvo logos around the vehicle.
Which I find pretty interesting that it's almost like they don't want it to be associated with the brand.
Yeah, and actually there's a large Chinese backing to Volvo now as a car company. And so they've kind of made this push to transition to their performance division and their electric division specifically, calling it Polestar. And now we're seeing the Polestar 1 being, a relative success. We're seeing the Polestar 2 coming out.
Okay. And then, so obviously this is designed to be a Model 3 competitor, right? Because the Polestar 1 is more of that like luxurious Model S competitor. And this is supposed to be the smaller, more economic choice. But what's really interesting is the starting price of this car is $60,000.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. As we know, the Model 3, the base version, still available even in China, are around $35,000.
Exactly.
US dollars.
Quite affordable for like a family who just wants to like reach out of their budget just to get their first electric car.
Right, and electric cars are expensive, but that being said, $35,000, considering the technology you're getting, the autopilot, things like that, it's definitely a great way to kind of get your feet wet without really stretching out that dollar, that budget that you have in the bank account. And then Polestar 2 comes out, and it's $60,000 starting price.
So, I'd like to say that we don't know too much about this vehicle. We just know the price and like what it offers, and we don't know exactly everything it offers.
Right.
But still, when you compare it, the Model 3 offers a lot at $35K. So it's puzzling to think what they might offer for $60K starting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, right? Like, as you mentioned, we don't know a lot about the trim levels. We don't know a lot about the power outputs, the 0 to 60, or even the range, which is one of the biggest factors.
Yeah.
But just looking at the car straight off the bat in terms of size, in terms of leg room, in terms of space, it's definitely a Model 3 spec.
Mm-hmm. It's smaller than it's not like a full-size sedan. You can tell. And it has a larger roof, which is interesting. When I first saw this car, I thought maybe a crossover kind of vibe is what it was giving, but it actually is a bit smaller. But yeah, it has a large roof, which I think is quite weird in terms of design.
And I will say, speaking on design, I think this car will tailor and be appreciated a lot more by the types of people that are fans of the more conventional car design.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you look at the Model 3, it's very much from the future, very different in terms of size, shape, and proportions.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But with the Polestar and even the Polestar 2, you're seeing a normal front grille. You're seeing those classic Thor's hammer type headlights. That's really the signature for the brand. And you're seeing a very stereotypically looking normal car. If this car was driving by you and it was making a sound, you would think gas car.
It really doesn't scream electric car. It just screams normal Volvo. It really does share that like Volvo design that they've come to develop in the last couple of years.
Absolutely. And so while they don't want to affiliate it with Volvo at all, you will recognize that it's very much Volvo, but it's a Polestar. In terms of looks, it's not like your Tesla in terms of very futuristic modern design. Instead, it's that traditional car.
So yeah, it's definitely interesting that they're trying to compete with the Model 3 with that interesting starting price. But when you think about starting price in electric cars, another name that usually people think of is the newer Porsche Taycan. So like the new one, obviously it was a Model S competitor. It's a bit more pricey, and performance, it's equal. Some say it's even better, the newest version, but they are working on a cheaper version. So what do you think about that?
So the Taycan kind of took the world by storm when it came out.
Yeah,
It was really the first successful electric car to come out and take a real shot at Tesla.
exactly. Yeah.
And so with that, you kind of saw the performance because Porsche is really renowned for their chassis and their track work. But then there were a lot more of those real life, day to day luxury features coming in as well. One thing that the Taycan was really hurt by was the range, right? I mean, still comparing it to the top of the line Model S, which is its direct competitor, you're seeing that this doesn't top out, while the Model S is now getting close to reaching that 400-mile mark.
Yeah.
The Taycan is typically averaging around 270 to 300. And so while Porsche is still working on their battery technology, it's definitely good to see that they are working on a quote-unquote entry-level Taycan.
Exactly.
The normal Taycans start in the six figures. They start around
Yeah.
100.
They're pretty expensive, and it's not a competitor for the base level Model S. It's definitely for the P100D that it competes with.
And now instead you're seeing the Taycan starting at a much lower, probably around $60,000 to $80,000
Exactly.
mark.
But once again, it shows that like even when these big companies like Volvo and Porsche, they're trying to make entry level electric cars, but both of them start at 30,000 almost above the base level Tesla Model 3.
Right, and you could argue that, both of those companies, Volvo and Porsche, are typically luxury brand companies, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, even Tesla, when they came out, they were a luxury brand company.
Exactly. The Roadster and the Model S were not common cars, especially the Roadster.
And unlike a lot of different other luxury brand companies, such as Cadillac or even Lincoln, these two car manufacturers, Porsche and Volvo, don't have a lower trim brand that they can kind of offset that electric car to. So if they really want to work on making an accessible electric car to enter the field, then really these are their best shots.
Yeah, I think Volvo can stick to what they're doing, but I think for Porsche, since they are in a business group with Audi and Volkswagen, then I think their entry level electric car will probably come between those brands. It's probably not Porsche themselves, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Porsche kind of does get to be part of that Volkswagen Group umbrella.
Yeah.
And so you definitely have been seeing Volkswagen doing a lot of electric work, and they definitely do share those two platforms.
So now let's move into the Ford Mustang GT350. So unfortunately, we've had some news about this car that it is going to be discontinued soon.
Yeah, so when I first heard that, I was honestly pretty upset.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the Shelby GT350. Like you mentioned, it's based on the Mustang chassis, but it's basically a Mustang on rails in terms of it's souped up. It's got a better engine with more power, better brakes, better performance, better aero. And it really was harnessing what it meant to drive a Mustang. And for it to be kind of that relatively, quote unquote, again, entry level type of real performance vehicle, right? This is a Shelby.
Yeah.
And typically, you always saw the Shelby 500 or the upper trims.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing, wow, this is kind of an accessible, at least somewhat accessible Shelby.
Yeah. So the starting price when it was new was around $60K. And luckily for people who are looking into the used car market, you can buy one of these for maybe like 2 years old with pretty low miles for maybe like, what, $35K, would you say?
Yeah, I think nowadays you're seeing them for around 30 to 40, tops 45K, and you're getting an almost new, relatively low mileage car. And if you're getting maybe a 2018 one, then you can get it with dual clutch transmission. But for all the other years, they've stuck to that classic manual.
The 6-speed manual. So the question is, now that it's getting discontinued, do you think that this car has the potential to be a true like collector's car in the future?
I could definitely see it. Ford has had a long history of, designing collectors' vehicles. We look at the classic Mustangs, the Mach 1, the Bullet. Some of these cars are worth millions of dollars today. And I could definitely see, especially GT350 with this classic type of coloring, right? The typical blue with the white stripes. It's iconic. It's well taken care of. It's, been maintained well. And it's got that 6-speed manual. I could definitely see that gaining a lot of value down the road.
I think that especially because, we've talked about electric cars quite recently, and the whole ideas of manuals, I think almost all manuals with good performance are probably going to stick around and become collector's cars, just because we don't see that many manual cars anymore in general.
And, combine that with the new emissions regulations coming out, a lot of the different rules, and a lot of the manufacturers transitioning to those twin turbocharged V6s. Honestly, we're going to see the V8 start to decline, or we're going to start to see a loss in a lot of these cars that make that big grunt, make that huge sound, and have a lot of that power.
Yeah, I think for sure that people are probably gonna, if they buy this car now for maybe 33,000, I could definitely see in a few years that this car increases in value, especially if they have that 6-speed manual transmission in them.
Absolutely.
So, quite recently, Lawrence Stroll has become a majority shareholder in Aston Martin. What are your thoughts about that?
Right. So Lawrence Stroll is a very famous and renowned Canadian business industrialist. He actually made most of his money from the fashion industry, but he's always had a huge racing passion. As you know, his son Lance races in Formula One, and he funds that team as well. And now it's interesting to see Lawrence Stroll making that move over and actually buying a major holding stake in Aston Martin and actually taking leadership of the organization.
So obviously this will have a change for Lawrence Stroll's like F1 dealings. But what does this say for the company for like that makes just the cars themselves?
So in the past few years, unfortunately, we've actually seen a little decline in Aston Martin. The company has been struggling a little bit with finances and funding, especially for the past couple of years. It was kind of Lawrence Stroll's saving grace jumping in and buying that majority stake. And I think we're going to see a huge turnaround in the company.
So one thing that they've been doing for the last couple of years is they've been using Mercedes AMG engines in their vehicles, and this has been a pretty good thing for them. I mean, they are true AMG engines. They have the plaque on the engine and everything. But if Lawrence Stroll becomes a majority, like now that he is, do you think that they may stop using those Mercedes engines?
So there have been rumors floating around in the industry that it's very possible that Aston Martin will be canceling their contract with Mercedes AMG. The question really then for me is, well, who are they going to use for the engines, right? Who is going to manufacture these engines? I'm pretty sure Aston Martin's not going to take the load onto themselves, especially not now when they're just kind of going through this renaissance, this rebirth. I really don't expect them to become a full outfit and a full engine manufacturer. I think they're still going to borrow it.
So personally, I think that my top pick for if they were to pick a new engine provider, probably Ford and Cosworth, because as you may know, a few years ago, Aston Martin was actually owned by Ford Motor Company, and they had Cosworth engines. If anyone's seen some of the old Vantages, they looked a lot like Mustangs from back in the day. So what do you think about Ford maybe becoming the new engine provider?
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I think even if we look back at something as simple as the Ford Fusion, that front grille is very reminiscent of that Aston Martin design. And, you know, that really does show that history that the company has had together. The interesting thing is, in relation to the Cosworth engine, so that UK outfit that specifically builds these performance engines, they've already built a couple engines with Cosworth, right? What was that car? The Valkyrie? Or the
the new Valkyrie and the Valhalla have been made in cooperation with the Red Bull F1 team and Cosworth.
Right, so that's going to be really exciting to see. It's really the coming together again of Cosworth. And you're right, that's actually a really good point. It may become time for Aston Martin to rebuild that relationship with Ford Cosworth and really transition completely to using their engines.
I think another big reason, another reason I would love to see that is because Cosworth is a British company, and making the engine British and pseudo-American, but also British, and then having Aston Martin as a British company, it'll bring back that powerhouse of a British automobile manufacturer that they had some time ago.
Absolutely. And I was actually just looking recently at some of the postings that Aston Martin was delivering, and it seems that they plan on resuming production at their UK set factory pretty soon, specifically of their DBX, their new performance SUV.
That's actually, it's pretty interesting. Do you think that the DBX engine might be altered as the car isn't actually out yet?
Yeah, it's very possible, but I really doubt it because typically with these manufacturers, what they're doing is they're placing these supply orders and these contracts well ahead of time. If they're getting ready to start manufacturing, it's very possible that they already have that deal. But that's not to say that down the road with future models and future additions and trims that they might be using a different type of engine, such as the Cosworth.
I think we'll definitely have to keep a keen eye on Aston Martin in the future to see what they're going to do, because as a car company, they have some interesting ideas, and their design philosophy is really good. So hopefully they'll get an engine that'll match that beautiful design, and we'll get to see them become an even better company in the future. Now we're going to move into our newest segment, Car Roast.